That time South Park took down an entire religion. Is this about Scientology? I feel like it's about Scientology. What up guys, Otterpop here. This is something that some of my viewers have wanted me to watch for a little while, where I look at this video called That Time South Park Took Down an Entire Religion, which sounds absolutely insane. It's South Park, it's a comedy show. How could it take down an entire religion? Well, if the religion is a little bit faulty to begin with, I guess I'm not entirely surprised. This video is by Blooms, and this video is only about 6 months old, but they have done other South Park related content, and a lot of people just keep bringing this up to me over and over again, so I'm like, okay, let me actually watch it. Let me see if I can dive a little bit deeper into Scientology, into the South Park interpretation of it, maybe some other related stuff. I imagine that, topics relating to, you know, like Isaac Hayes, who did depart the show after this episode was released, that's probably going to get discussed a little bit. Maybe some things with like, I don't even remember what celebrity was featured in that particular episode. What was that? A season 4, season 5 episode? The Scientology one? The one where, you know, Stan is like the new Jesus of the Scientology cult, and there was a famous celebrity trying to come out of the closet, literally speaking, not metaphorically, and I imagine that there are other celebrities who believe in stuff like this too, but it's all really fascinating, because I'd always heard of Scientology, but I didn't know much about it, and then South Park opened my eyes to, these guys sound weird, only to learn that most of what happened in the episode was true. What the Scientology people believe is ludicrous. And this is coming from a scientist, not a Scientologist. Big fat fucking difference. But a scientist who does firmly believe in facts and truth and logic. Not whatever this is. So yes, thank you so much, Blooms, for putting together this video. I say that having not even watched the video yet, but you have 400,000 subscribers. A lot of people keep telling me about this. The video has 4.7 million views. It must be good. Clearly. So, I'd love to learn more about why and how South Park took down an entire religion. This'll be fun.
In Hollywood at that time, Scientology was just simply a no-go. The lawyers would just say no. And whether they said, look, you're right, this should be completely up for parody, we don't want to risk it, and we don't want to go to court, and they sue everybody.
Our #1 story in the countdown tonight, Cruise, Scientology, and South Park.
We were told that the people involved
It was Tom Cruise.
demanded that show be pulled off the air, and it was.
One of the touchiest episodes was about Scientology, a notoriously litigious group.
Isaac Hayes recently quit his job as the voice of the character Chef. Goodbye.
Hello, children! Ooh, that's
The battle was just
oh boy.
getting it out. Once it had gone on the air, you couldn't put it back.
Hayes said he left
This
because
is a
of,
little
quote,
jarring, I'll say that.
ridicule of religious community. So, Scientology, you may have won
Okay.
this battle, but the million-year war for Earth has just begun.
Sorry, that's a little bit jarring and difficult to watch.
Alright class, I hope you enjoyed that little intro I made. As you can see, today we're talking about one of South Park's most controversial episodes. Now, if you've attended
Fair.
any of my lectures in the past, you're probably well aware of the fact that South
yep.
Park is pretty controversial.
Holy
In
moly,
fact,
look
you
at all
probably
these
have at least
views.
some knowledge on the controversy we'll be talking about today, considering its large section in my most popular lecture, and the large-scale news coverage it received at the time. But even if you watched that lecture, you probably don't know the details of the situation, and through my research,
Not so
I
much,
discovered
no.
that this rabbit hole goes so much deeper than I ever thought possible. Today, we're talking about that time that South Park took on one of the scariest looming threats in all of Hollywood, an organization that struck fear into the hearts of anyone who considered speaking out against them, considered for many years to be completely off limits to criticism. We're talking about Scientology.
It's interesting that he's calling out Scientology as being one of the scariest things to go up against when there have been multiple instances of, oh my gosh, where was it, like Israel or something? No, I could be wrong. But what? Maybe it was Israel who had some serious issues with a few other South Park episodes that have been brought up, namely featuring the character Muhammad. Even when Muhammad was censored for an entire episode, and there were still problems with it. because I do believe that there are only 5 banned episodes in the entirety of South Park, and all of them relate to the Prophet Muhammad being depicted. 3 of them, he was actually depicted. The other 2, his entire body, his voice, everything about him, except for name, was censored. And I mean that very literally. There was a censored block over his character throughout the entire 2 episodes. But again, all 5 of them featured the Prophet Muhammad in some way, and those episodes got banned as a result due to outrage from especially the Muslim community. I think that there were other people who were offended as well, but I can't remember exactly who or for what reason. When you have an entire religion, or maybe even an entire portion of religion, going up against, well, okay, so because theoretically, I have heard many accounts of Muslim people who thought that South Park's depiction of Muhammad was very funny and clever, who did like it, and who didn't like that it had to be censored over time and eventually just pushed out of existence altogether. So technically speaking, I'd say that there was only a subset. I can't really define size, but there was a subset of the Muslim community that called outrage to South Park in its depictions. But then you have Scientology, which I'm pretty sure the entire religious organization as a whole denounced South Park. And probably other people as well. So, you know, saying all of that out loud does actually make a little bit of sense as to why Scientology would be the biggest hurdle. I think.
We're talking about Scientology. Well, you see, all of that scary and threatening stuff I just said used to be true. That is until South Park made this episode and proved that they were significantly more bark than bite. In fact, it's very likely that this single episode of South Park not only exposed the true nature of Scientology to the general public for the very first time, but started a chain reaction of events that caused such immense, irreversible damage to the group that their continuing descent into obscurity can be directly traced back to the release of this episode. To put it simply, this cartoon directly led to the downfall
the Mountain King, by the way.
World's most successful cult. It also might have caused some more minor effects outside of Scientology. For example, it led to threats of legal action from one of the most famous people in the world. It nearly canceled the media tour for Mission Impossible 3. It led to an incredibly invasive private investigation that included attempted espionage. It caused one of the main voice actors from the show to quit after 10 years.
Yeah, fuck Scientology for making Isaac Hayes leave.
An exciting incident that would lead to that same actor's untimely death just a few years later.
Yeah.
You know, just minor stuff.
Yeah,
now, that might
little
sound
stuff.
like a lot, but I promise you all will be explained in time. And trust me, we haven't even scratched the surface yet. Because this is that time South Park took down an entire religion.
Again, love the theme of In the Hall of the Mountain King playing in the background. I mean, that's a classic track. It's used in so many videos, namely gaming videos, but I feel like a lot of analysis channels like this will also use it too, depending on if it fits the tone, which I think in this case, it absolutely does. And what Blooms, is that what it is? What Blooms is talking about, yeah, it's just a bunch of minor stuff, you know. If you think about it though, based on what Scientology is, which I'm sure that Blooms is going to get into the general gist of what Scientology is. At least I would hope so, because that would probably make for the best video. But calling Scientology probably the biggest cult in the world is not an understatement. Well, okay, it may or may not still be the biggest cult in the world, but I think at the time, like at the time that South Park released the episode, even shortly before and shortly after especially, that probably was true. Scientology probably was the biggest cult in the world. I don't think there's necessarily a set in stone line on the difference between a religion and a cult. There is a difference between the two. The cults are usually subsets of religions themselves. Usually, not always. Sometimes they're their own entirely different thing. But I do know for a fact that religion is based more on openness in terms of their structure, their beliefs, and things like that nature. Cults usually rely more on trade secrets that they only share with members. I believe that's what the difference is. I don't remember for sure, but that's okay, that's not the difference, but it is a stark difference between religion and cult. And from what I understand of Scientology is that you do have to either be a member for quite some time, you do have to pay some kind of sum of money, or maybe it's both that are required in order to gain the knowledge and the secrets of the Scientology group. And I'm not even sure how Scientology got to be as big as it was today. And again, I don't know if Blooms is going to talk about that. And if he does, it might only be briefly brought up. But if he does talk about it, it should definitely be briefly brought up, at least in my opinion. So yeah, I have no idea how Scientology actually came to be. I have no idea how it came to have so many members and how it got so widespread. Again, pretty much amongst the entire world. But hopefully I learn a bit more about that. If I don't here, I'll probably do a bit of quick research on my own.
You know what else Tom Cruise is often associated with? Fighter jets.
Yep.
And you know who else loves
Top
fighter
Gun,
jets?
I think.
Everyone. So that's why you should go and check out today's sponsor, War Thunder.
Uh-huh.
War Thunder is
Gotcha.
the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever
Isn't
made.
Tom
You
Cruise
can take
associated
command
with
of over
the
2,500
what's that
different
series of
vehicles,
like
including
spy-esque
tanks, planes,
movies
helicopters, and
called?
ships. War Thunder also has one of the most sophisticated vehicle
I think he's part
models
of.
in all
I
of
think he's in
gaming.
Top
Every
Gun
vehicle
too,
is
though.
intricately modeled down to its individual components. Like
Mission
engines,
Impossible,
fuel
that's
tanks,
it.
weapons, and
He's
crew,
associated with the
all
Mission Impossible
susceptible to
movies.
damage or disabling
And again,
from
I
enemy
think
fire.
Top Gun
The
as
game
well,
also
but
offers an
I don't know
insanely
anything about those
comprehensive
movies because
customization
those
system
kinds of
with
flicks don't
countless
usually
different
interest me.
camos, historical
Kingsman,
markings,
that kind of
decorations,
style and
and all
format,
types of
that
stuff for all
interests me.
different types
That's
of
fun.
vehicles. Thanks to all these small
That
little
mixes
details, it is incredibly
great
easy to become immersed in the
cinematography
intense combat
and
of War Thunder.
action
My favorite part
sequences
of
and
War
comedy.
Thunder is just how
That's
intense
freaking
the combat
great.
gets. When you're
And
fully
good
immersed
character
in this
moments
game,
too.
it really is a
But
feeling that's hard to
Mission
find in any
Impossible,
other
it
game.
just
And
seems
the
more
best part
like
is this game is
spy
totally
mission,
free. You can play War
mission.
Thunder for free on PC,
That blows up.
PlayStation, and
That
Xbox.
blows up.
Just use my link in the video
I don't
description
know.
or pinned comment to sign up. And if you're a new player or you
You may
haven't
hate
played in
me.
over
You may
6
hate me
months,
for
you get
saying
a
that stuff
massive
about
bonus
Mission
pack
Impossible,
that
especially if
includes
you are a
multiple
fan of the
premium
movies.
vehicles
I
and an
apologize, it's just
exclusive
not my
vehicle
shtick.
decorator, 100,000 silver lions,
Regardless
and
if I'm
7
right or
days
not.
of premium account. And this is only for a limited time, so that's why you need to go click the link in the description or pinned
I will
comment
not
and
click the
come
link in
join
the
a
description.
worldwide
I'm sorry,
community
I
of
have
over
no
70
interest in War
million
Thunder.
players
War
by downloading
Thunder,
War Thunder. And thank you to War Thunder for
War of
sponsoring this
Tanks
video.
or World of Tanks or whatever. Not my shtick. Science nonfiction. Oh boy.
Now, I'm going to assume that you all know what Scientology is by now.
No.
But I think it's important to give some general information about
Okay,
the
thank
religion,
you,
and
thank
I use that
you.
word very lightly, as
Yeah,
well as
thank
get an
you.
idea of what the general public's knowledge of Scientology was like before the release of this episode. In short, they didn't know
Thank
much.
you, sir.
In 2005, Scientology had already been around for decades, with many sources claiming the church reached its peak anywhere from the late 70s to the early 90s.
Wait. Did he say in 2005 it had been around already for decades? With most of its prominence between the 1970s and 90s? No wonder they got so many followers. They got all the hippies.
In 2005, Scientology had already been around for decades, with many sources claiming the church reached its peak anywhere from the late 70s to the early 90s. In terms of how many Scientologists there were at their peak, it's pretty ambiguous, with some people claiming they never broke 30,000 and others claiming upwards of 700,000. As you'll see, the church tends to be pretty unreliable when releasing any information about themselves, so it seems like the true scale of Scientology will never really be known. At this time in the mid-2000s,
We're not privy to that
the general
info.
public had heard of Scientology. Like I said, it had been around for decades, and over that time it had picked up some rather well-known people.
Where'd it come from, though?
Such as Tom Cruise, who had become a public advocate for the group as early as the 1990s, and
Wow.
quickly became the face of the church. This
Huh.
meant that knowledge of Scientology was very surface level in the mainstream. People had heard of it, but no one
Yeah.
really knew anything about it, as the church liked to keep a rather low profile. So, when the face of Scientology went on
Cult.
Oprah in May of 2005 acting like he had been hitting the slopes in the green room, people started to wonder just what the hell did Scientology do to this man?
What is...
Pretend.
You know, Katie once told 17 magazine. Yes!
Though he
What
didn't
is he
directly
doing?
speak on Scientology in the interview, he would later make some statements that directly echo the beliefs of Scientology, going after Brooke Shields for her antidepressant use. You see, Scientology doesn't really like the idea of psychiatry. In fact, Dianetics, which is one of the core principles of Scientology, was created as essentially a replacement for psychiatric care. A month later, in an interview with Matt Lauer, Cruz would expand on these views, calling psychiatry a pseudoscience and condemning any use of psychiatric drugs. Interestingly enough, he actually made some points about the overprescription of these medications that are reasonable and make sense. The problem was his insistence that there are absolutely no cases where they should be used, and his refusal to accept psychiatry as a legitimate medical practice.
I almost started thinking that it was interesting that they'd go after psychiatry and not psychology, but thinking about what each of those practices are, it actually kind of makes sense. Both psychology and psychiatry are focused on improving and discussing mental health related topics, but psychology works more from an environmental and therapeutic and talking related dynamic when it comes to mental health, whereas psychiatry takes more of a medical approach, because most psychiatrists, well, not most psychiatrists, all psychiatrists actually, in order to be a psychiatrist, do have medical degrees, whether that's MD, well, obviously MD is medical degree, dumbass, but psychiatrists do have medical degrees and medical training and knowledge and information about how the biology of the human body works, because there are many conditions related to mental health that are caused by something in our body and not necessarily by an environmental source or trauma or anything of the sort. There are lots of people out there that do have chemical imbalances in their bodies or in their brains that do cause the issues that some people have. I mean, think about something like depression. Some people do have depressions that are a result of external influences, you know, a death in the family or some kind of childhood trauma, but those are external factors. But there are forms of biological depression where your brain is not producing enough serotonin or dopamine, and you need medication to help increase the production and activity of those chemical compounds in your brain. That's what some kinds of antidepressants are. Or all of them. Some or all of them. I don't remember for sure. In certain cases, if your brain chemistry is actually very normal and you're just having these bouts of depressive episodes, is that you may need to talk to an individual and try and, you know, work through some of the issues that you might be having. But for something a bit more severe, something that especially is caused by an imbalance in your brain chemistry, is something you might need actual chemical medical treatment for. These things do happen. The human body is incredibly complex in a variety of ways, and your brain is no exception to that rule at all. Your brain is the most complex organ you have in your body. I mean, granted, all the organs in your bodies can be pretty complex, but your brain, the most complex, without question. Given how it transmits electricity, how it transmits information, all this memory recall, this intelligence. I mean, I don't know why I'm singling out those, but it was the first things that came to my mind. But the brain is so incredibly complex, and in some ways it can be so easy to disrupt that balance, especially for life. I mean, you could have a specific genetic composition or genetic markers that make you susceptible to those chemistry imbalances. And this is where psychiatry can really help. It's just science.
Also, the fact that as the interview went on, it seems like he's getting increasingly angrier, starkly contrasting the lighthearted, joking attitude he shared literally moments ago, to the point where he's essentially yelling at Matt Lauer.
And you should do that also, because just knowing people who are on Ritalin isn't enough. You should be a little bit more responsible in knowing
I'm not prescribing Ritalin, Tom.
So for the first time, the general public gets a small glimpse into the beliefs of this group, and their first impression is that Scientology, despite the name, seemed to be rather far removed from any form of science. And the main spokesperson for the group seems like he himself might benefit from some psychiatric care based on how incredibly unstable he was in his last two interviews. So now all the general public knows about Scientology is that they don't believe in psychiatry and their main spokesman might be clinically insane. And with that, the two creators of an adult animated TV show decided it was time to do some digging. And what they found would shock them so much that they knew they had to share it with the public, and this would be the beginning of the end.
Because if I recall correctly, Isaac Hayes himself was a Scientologist before either before the episode about Scientology even aired, or even before South Park came out, you know, like before it started getting released. I don't remember for sure, but I do remember hearing that Isaac Hayes himself was a Scientologist. So I'm wondering if Stone and Parker did dig a little bit deeper. Was it via Hayes or was it via somebody else? I mean, maybe they couldn't have necessarily named who it was, because otherwise, you never know. The Scientology organization might sue him or something like that, because they seem a little bit crazy. So either we have no idea how they learned this, or we found, or like the general audience found out in time. I don't know for sure. Maybe Blooms is gonna mention that. I don't know. I gotta pause every so often, you know? I have to get these thoughts out. This is what it means to be an analysis and commentary, I can't say channel, that's not entirely accurate. What it means to be a commentary and analysis creator of sorts. I can't just let the whole video play out. I have to add my own thoughts and ideas about what's happening, what is being talked about, what should be talked about, those kinds of things. I need to add my commentary and analysis. Otherwise, I feel like I'm not doing my job as a commentator and analyzer, you know?
Stan, do you want to hear the great secret doctrine of life behind Scientology?
Sure.
All right, go ahead and tell him.
Here we go. The true prophet.
On
Stan
November
Marsh?
16, 2005, episode 12 of the 9th season of South Park would air on Comedy Central, simply titled Trapped in the Closet. The episode opens with the boys looking for something fun to do on a Saturday, with Stan insisting that they do something that's free since he's saving up for a new bike. Cartman, being annoyed by this, reminds Stan of the first law of physics.
Anything that's fun costs at least $8.
The rest of the boys then go to play laser tag.
Forgot about
Side
that.
note, you know you're broke when even Kenny can afford to do something that you can't. So while Stan is out looking for some fun free activities, he just so happens to pass by some friendly folks offering free personality tests and talking about something called Scientology. Apparently, it's a cool new thing, as celebrities like Tom Cruise and John Travolta are Scientologists themselves. Stan begins to notice that all of this is very religion-like, so he asks about it, and their response isn't very reassuring.
Then how come that sign says Church of Scientology?
Oh, that's just his thing. What's the Denver Broncos record now, 6-2?
One of the Scientologists then
Yeah,
begins asking
deflection.
Stan some questions, and by the time he's done, he comes to the conclusion that Stan is horribly, miserable, and depressed. In his mind, there is only one solution to this.
What do I do?
It's very simple. We just need $240.
Stan then heads home to discuss his depression with his parents, asking them to pay for the $200.
Stanley, I didn't know you were miserable.
Neither did I!
They say that if he really wants
Yeah.
it, he should spend the money he's been saving for his bike. And even though he's a bit more hesitant, he decides that it's worth it.
Yeah, well, just like the rest of us, you have to make choices with your money. You want a bike, or do you want to not be depressed?
I mean, damn. By the way, going through this recap of this episode is really taking me back, because holy moly, I haven't seen this episode in forever. This had to have been like a season 4 episode, I think. Maybe season 5? It was called Trapped in the Closet, I think. Oh, wow, I was way off. I was right on the title, by the way. It was called Trapped in the Closet. No, this was a season 9 episode? It was that late? Oh man, I thought it was being smart and like being wow, I can actually kind of remember when this came out. No, I couldn't. But you gotta be careful when getting diagnoses, because only psychologists and psychiatrists can really do that. You're the only ones who can diagnose, not random people you ask for a personality test on the street. But then again, Stan is a kid. How would he know? Somebody's gotta teach him.
You want a bike, or do you want to not be depressed?
Upon paying the fee, they begin to explain the history of Scientology to Stan. The founder and prophet goes by the name of L. Ron Hubbard. Now, Elron has his own extensive history that the episode doesn't dive into in detail. However, they do mention the fact that he was a science fiction writer. During his life, he built up a rather large resume as a serial scammer and is known for some absolutely incredible quotes, such as, "You don't get rich writing science fiction. If you want to get rich, you start a religion."
Oh my god.
Bit on the nose there, Elron.
A little bit.
They continued to explain that he discovered that the body has thetans that cause negative emotions, which can be read by a device called an e-meter. Now, at this point, you may notice that it seems like they really did a lot of research into how Scientology recruits people, and according to ex-Scientologists, their portrayal is very accurate.
So these are actual questions on Scientology's personality test.
We just need $240.
I mean, that's exactly how that goes. The
That
standard
is wild.
response to every item on the test evaluation, they go, Scientology can help you with that. And then they sell you an introductory course.
Well, there's a reason for that. First of all, I want
That's
to give
kinda cool, by
a
the
huge
way.
shout out to Andrew Gold. Funnily enough, he's the same guy who interviewed Jesse Morton, the man who made the threats towards South Park after episode 200. Made a whole video about that if you want to check it out. But Andrew also interviewed Mark Headley, an ex-Scientologist who now advocates against Scientology. This interview provided me with tons of information about how exactly South Park impacted Scientology, and I
Wow.
highly recommend you go listen to it if you have the time, as I will be referencing it throughout this video. In this interview, Mark mentions that one of the reasons South Park was so knowledgeable on Scientology is because they consulted with a man named Mark Ebner, a journalist who
so
had
we
been
do actually
researching Scientology for decades, going as far as to go undercover as a potential recruit for Scientology. He's essentially
Wow.
an expert in Scientology, and Matt and Trey worked directly with him while making this episode.
So we do actually know the name of the individual who they consolidated with regarding the Scientology episode and information and whatnot. We do actually know the name. I would have expected, like, okay, I mean, I didn't expect it to be Isaac Hayes necessarily. I would have thought it could have been an ex-Scientology member, but essentially an investigative journalist who went undercover in the Church of Scientology. Ooh, damn. Because here's the thing about investigative journalists. Their focus is on the unbiased truth, more or less. I mean, there are always going to be bad apples in one industry or another. But investigative journalists, you don't see that as much. They do actually want to know the truth. They hunt down every single lead, and some of them, clearly like this journalist that they were talking to, will take extra risks in order to get the information they want. And by the way, I'm sure that Stone and Parker got a lot of good information from this journalist, but at the same time, you really have to commend Stone and Parker for doing their research, because I feel like this particular episode did have much more to it than just being a typical episode of recapping in their own humorous and parodying way various events and people and whatnot. But there definitely seemed like there was more to this particular episode. And you can see why. Because this wasn't necessarily just meant to be a parody. I almost wonder if Stone and Parker intended this to be an expose episode. Like, they wanted to expose Scientology. Wow. If I'm right, I respect Stone and Parker a hell of a lot more now. Holy shit.
He's essentially an expert in Scientology, and Matt and Trey worked directly with him while making this episode. So while Stan gets his thetan levels read, they quickly realize that Stan is a very special boy.
There was only one person who ever registered OT9 in the history of our church. Our prophet has returned.
Ah, right.
Word spreads fast, and before he knows it, Stan's house is swarmed by Scientologists hoping to get a look at the reincarnation of their prophet. One of the more excited followers even found their way into Stan's room. Of course, it's
Tom Cruise.
Cruise,
Yep.
who seeks approval in his acting abilities from Stan. Stan's answer isn't exactly what Tom was looking for, and he heads to the only place he knows.
The closet.
Well, I mean, you're not like as good as Leonardo DiCaprio, but you're okay, I guess. You're not Gene Hackman or that guy that played Napoleon Dynamite, but you're okay.
Damn. Guy who played Napoleon Dynamite was great.
Dad, Tom Cruise won't come out of the closet.
Try as they might, they cannot manage to get Tom Cruise to leave the closet, even when R. Kelly shows up to give his 2 cents.
Oh, and R. Kelly.
Standing here, and Tom Cruise locked himself in the closet. So I pull out my gun.
The current leader of Scientology decides that Stan needs to know all of the secrets of Scientology, so he sits him down to explain the actual beliefs of Scientologists. I'm not going to explain the whole clip. I'll link it in the description if you want to watch it. But the story is incredibly fantastical. It includes tales of Lord Xenu, aliens, intergalactic airplanes, soul catchers, brainwashing, and alien souls possessing mankind. Completely unrelated, but remember how they mentioned L. Ron Hubbard was a science fiction writer? Anyways, throughout the entire 2-minute scene, a text box appears at the bottom of the screen reading, "This is what Scientologists actually believe," in all caps. And as it turns out, yeah, this is what Scientologists actually believe. But actually, the vast majority of Scientologists don't know this story, as it's kept very secret. Now you may be thinking, why would a religion that's trying to convert people want to keep their beliefs secret? Isn't that kind of like the opposite of what you want to do? And that's correct. In fact, if I didn't know any better, I might say that this behavior seems to be more in line with what a cult would do.
Thank you!
But as we'll talk about in a little bit, there's a good reason why they don't want this information out there. So after
They don't want this information out there because they know it sounds ridiculous. Or because they don't want the world to make them think they're ridiculous, which the world does. The world thinks they're ridiculous. And yes, I will proudly say it. I think Scientology is ridiculous. I remember seeing the entire spiel play out about, oh, this is what Scientologists believe, and I could not believe what I was seeing. I'm like, this must be a joke, right? But with the whole, this is what Scientologists actually believe shtick at the bottom, and this it looked like something straight out of a science fiction novel, or like a science fiction weird-ass space opera novel film series thing. I remember listening to the story like, there's no way this is what people actually believe happened. It makes no logical sense whatsoever. There's no evidence that it happened. And yet, here we are. And of course, the fact that Ron L. Hubbard was previously a science fiction writer before becoming a cult leader, essentially. It absolutely makes sense. But the fact that people believe this, the entire story that played out, it's absolutely mind-boggling. Like, don't get me wrong. People can have whatever faith and beliefs they want. And I'm not going to disparage them for that. But when you're trying to believe in the reality of something so utterly ridiculous, I can't support that. Again, every other religion, you guys do and believe what you want. That's fine by me. Scientology is one of those very, very, very rare exceptions where, were people high when they listened to and decided, I'm gonna believe this?
But as we'll talk about in a little bit, there's a good reason why they don't want this information out there. So after Stan is educated on the full truth of Scientology, he's asked to continue where he left off and add to the sacred doctrine. Meanwhile, Tom Cruise is still in the closet, refusing to leave. In fact, he's denying that he's even in the closet to begin with.
It's time for you to come out of the closet.
I'm not in the closet.
So while Stan is writing his new sacred doctrine, the rest of the boys tell him that they're concerned about his involvement in this cult, to which Stan denies that it even is a cult and claims that he's found meaning in it.
I didn't know you were depressed. Neither did I. But now, if you guys can't accept this great thing I belong to, then I suppose we're no longer friends.
Back with Tom Cruise, he is still in the closet, so they try to use fellow Scientologist John Travolta to get him out. This, of course, just leads to John Travolta going into the closet as well, now also refusing to come out. And of course, R. Kelly just gets angrier.
And I pull out my gun!
Fuck R. Kelly, honestly.
When Stan shares
He's an
his
awful
new
human
writings
being.
with the leader of Scientology,
He's already dead, though,
he's
I
very
think.
excited about them, until Stan reveals the most dramatic change that he's added.
And best of all, I wrote that all the Scientologists should no longer have to pay money to belong.
What?
He then goes on to reveal his true intentions with Scientology.
You don't actually believe this crap, do you? Those people out there buy that crap, but I thought you were smart enough to see what was really going on. What's better than telling people a stupid story and having them believe you? Having them pay you for it, stupid! That's how a scam works. But this is a scam on a global scale.
Stan is rather caught off guard at first, but when he starts talking about making millions of dollars, he remembers how he needs a new bike, and he's a lot more receptive to it.
Yeah, I get you.
Then keep riding, Elron. Your people are waiting.
Meanwhile, Tom Cruise and John Travolta are still in the closet, and they still refuse to come out, even after R. Kelly is sent up there to get them out. R. Kelly then gets curious, and who would have thought, he ends up in the closet
too.
Now I'm in the closet. Now I'm in the closet too.
Everybody's in the closet.
In the morning,
Out of
Stan
the closet.
is ready to share his new doctrine with the world. He begins to read, but as he looks out across the sea of people and recognizes just how much this means to so many of them, he knows that he can't do it. He decides that it's best for these people to know the real truth.
We're all looking for answers, you know? Sometimes we want to know the answers so badly that we believe just about anything. I'm not the reincarnation of L. Ron Hubbard. And Scientology is just a big fat global scam.
This does not go over very well, and all of the Scientologists begin to threaten to sue Stan. This includes Tom Cruise, who finally made it out of the closet.
He finally came out of the
as
closet.
Stan adamantly defends himself against the threats. This is referencing the fact that Scientology has a very long history of taking legal action against those who have come out against them, starting lawsuits in several different countries over the course of many years. The episode comes to an end with Stan making a final proclamation against the group, and it's pretty clearly meant to be the creators themselves speaking directly to Scientology.
Okay, good. Do it. I'm not scared of you. Sue me.
And as the credits roll, they play into the joke even further by refusing to show any of the actual names of the
I
staff who
remember
worked on the
that.
episode.
Oh,
Instead,
man.
they replace every name with Jane or John Smith.
That's
And that's where
amazing.
the episode ends. It's one of my
That was
favorites. It
amazing.
has hilarious moments and some scathing commentary, but all around, it's a pretty typical episode of South Park.
Kind of.
And I gotta say, I'm absolutely certain that all parties being referenced acted completely reasonably after this episode. I really doubt that there was any sort of extreme backlash.
About that. Yeah. Let's go.
Yeah,
Let's
we
go.
probably should have seen this coming, especially since this is the second time I made that joke. As you might imagine, Scientology wasn't exactly happy about their portrayal in this episode. I didn't really get into it in the intro, but I mentioned that before this, Scientology was seen as off-limits in the media. People were scared to talk about them at all. The reason for that
With all
is
the
that they
constant
have a
lawsuits,
long
it makes
history
sense.
of doing things that are best described as batshit crazy. They're kind of known
Damn.
for going to the most extreme lengths if it ensured that they would get their way, especially if it meant protecting their image. For example, in the podcast, Mark mentions that the group perpetrated the largest infiltration of the U.S. government in history, as thousands of Scientologists were hired into positions in various government organizations
Oh
and
my
offices
goodness.
in an effort to dispose of unfavorable records about Scientology. Yes, that is real. You can Google it. It's called Operation Snow White. So if they were willing to go that far with the U.S. government,
Holy
you would
moly.
assume
Oh,
they
yeah.
definitely weren't about to sit by and watch as a cartoon expose their best-kept secret to the entire world.
You know.
So,
Especially
they
now that
started
everybody
digging.
knew.
You see, Scientologist has a branch known as the Office of Special Affairs, or the OSA, whose job it is to essentially investigate and harass anyone that they deem to be enemies of Scientology.
Oh boy.
Not only that, according to Mark, they have people whose full-time job it is to scrub through every video about Scientology that exists on the internet and transcribe and summarize them.
And they're printing out and making copies of and
Wow.
transcribing every single video.
They're
that gets out
insane.
about Scientology on the internet.
Oh my god.
Which means they are definitely doing that to this video right now. So, hello Scientologists watching this.
Hello.
Hope you're doing good. I'm sure that's a very tiring
Sorry,
job.
bad joke.
So, best of luck to you. So in 2011, former Scientologist Mark Rathburn, who is the third Mark connected to Scientology that we've talked about in this video, uploaded some documents to his blog about Scientology's look into South Park. These documents detailed how the OSA had been in the process of conducting a full-blown investigation into Trey Parker and Matt Stone, discussing potential,
Makes
quote,
sense.
direct lines to Matt and Trey through connections such as friends. Quote, One is Matthew Prager, who has been a friend since 1991. Another is John Stamos, who is best friends with Matt Stone. Apparently, his ex-wife, Rebecca Roman, is also good friends with Stone. These documents also detail what they call special collections, or the methods they would use to gather information on Matt and Trey. This included things like going through their trash, purchasing their phone records, hacking airline reservations, and purchasing bank records. According to Mark Headley, they would also do things like get information on the company's catering to South Park Studios, just in case they eventually wanted to get someone to work for those companies to get inside the offices, and they would also do things like write down every license plate in the parking lot and run them to identify the owners.
Holy shit, this is insane.
They even went as far as to attempt to hire a film student to act as a spy and get a job at South Park Studios. I'm just going to go ahead and read the whole document for this one because it's short and it is unbelievably funny.
Oh my god.
A PI met with a young filmmaker who recently graduated college, who was a student of Eric Sherman. The filmmaker recently did an interview with Lloyd Kaufman, a friend of Trey Parker and Matt Stone. He has agreed to assist to establish some comm lines in the South Park studios and to try and get intelligence on their plans with regard to Scientology.
God.
He is
Really?
going to approach Kaufman to see if Kaufman can get him an introduction to Parker and Stone, and either possibly get a job as an intern there or as a writer. Parentheses, he has seen every episode of South Park. Like,
what?
If that's all it takes, Scientology, hook me up, dude. Like, I think I even have a better resume than that guy. So
Seriously.
Scientology quite literally did everything that they could in a massive, coordinated effort to dig up something negative about Matt or Trey that they could hurt them with.
Which I'm sure at that point, after more than like 8 full seasons and most of a 9th season at that point, I'm sure had already been done dozens of times by that point. South Park is known for their parodies and their interesting representation of various people, places, events, concepts, all that good jazz. And not to mention that Scientology thinks that South Park is going to continue this escapade of theirs on Scientology. For them, it's usually a one and done thing, because they're just looking at stuff related to the real world. What's happening right then and there, within a few weeks at most, before an episode actually airs. So, you really think that South Park is going to continue disparaging Scientology? No, it's just one episode. Boom, done. I mean, sure, they like to bring back recurring characters and elements, but they don't usually bring back recurring events unless something new happens related to that event, you know? Oh my god. The Scientology people are insane. If they're gonna look this deep into a studio that created an episode about them, however it was reviewed, this is absolutely insane. Oh my god, especially trying to dig more deeper of information onto the studio and whatnot. Seriously? This is something that freaking government and law enforcement does. This is not something that a church does. Oh my god, that's despicable.
So, what did this meticulous and exhaustive investigation reveal about Matt Stone, Trey Parker, and anyone else at South Park Studios? Absolutely nothing. Scientology has never released a single piece of information that was negative or embarrassing about any employees at South Park Studios. So unless this investigation was even more extensive than we thought, and it's still going on nearly 20 years later, it's safe to assume that they just didn't find anything of interest. But why were they so mad in the first place? Why is it so important to keep their beliefs secret? And why would they go to such extreme lengths to get revenge on 2 dudes who made a cartoon about them?
Because they're a cult.
There's a few reasons for that. Firstly, because their religion commands them to. You see, our old friend Elron created a policy for Scientology long ago that he dubbed Fair Game Law, which identified that, quote, any action taken against a suppressive person or group is, quote, fair game. That pretty much means if someone is talking bad about Scientology, it's your job to make sure that they stop. I don't care how you do it, make sure they stop.
Oh my
and despite
god,
the fact
no.
that Scientologists claim this practice was discontinued decades ago, their actions speak a lot louder than their words. So that explains a lot of their history of aggressively trying to silence their opposition with lawsuits and threats. For example, Mark mentions a case where they tried to sue a whistleblower of the church, but ended up having to pay her millions of dollars. As he said, their strategy is always to either threaten you or to bribe you. And let me be clear in saying that Scientology, I'm sure you're not too happy about this video being up and reminding everyone of all the bad stuff you do, but I do have some great news for you.
Hi,
My
Scientology.
journalistic integrity can be bought for a lot less than $1 million. I mean, you could just slide me $50K and this video will cease to exist, no questions asked. I'm just saying.
No. I'm gonna tell you right now, that is not gonna be the same case with me. I have way too much integrity, pride, and stubbornness. I can't be bought out to not release this video. Fuck that. This is good information and entertainment and explanation and exploration. This is awesome. Blooms has created a great video about South Park and Scientology. Granted, it's more than halfway over. It's like 2/3 over, give or take. So yes, I know there's still some stuff to be talked about, obviously. But fuck that if you think you can buy me. Even if you gave me $1 million. Even if you had a suitcase with $1 million inside of it, I might stare at it and be like, wow, that's a lot of money. And then be like, you're really gonna try and buy my silence. Because you can't take criticism. What a joke! Oh man, bitches like that do that? Oh no, you must be really butthurt. It's more of a sting on your pride than it is mine. Fuck you guys!
But that still doesn't explain why they insisted that their beliefs remain a secret. You know, the whole Lord Xenu and alien souls watching movies or whatever. Why does it matter that South Park talked about all of that? Well, you see, South Park talking about these confidential beliefs was the single action that would seal Scientology's fate for good. Allow me to explain. As I mentioned earlier, the general public knew very little about Scientology at the time, just like the Scientologists wanted. All the alien stuff had been leaked onto the internet at this point, but only the most niche corners of the internet were aware, and Scientology had done a really good job of silencing anyone who dared to share this information through essentially abusing copyright laws. So basically, no one knew about any of this at the time, and it had received no widespread media coverage. At the same time, 90% of Scientologists knew very little about Scientology. The stuff about Lord Xenu and alien souls, only a tiny number of Scientologists actually knew about.
Which begs to differ. How did an insider get information?
He was at the international headquarters of Scientology for 15 years, and he never learned about any of that stuff. He first learned all of that stuff from the South Park episode, and he didn't even believe it at first. He had to confirm it with his wife, who was previously a higher-ranking official in Scientology.
Oh my god.
And she told him that, yeah, that's exactly what they believe. And the reason that no Scientologists know about this stuff is because in order to learn about it, you have to make it to operating Thetan level 3. OT levels in Scientology function essentially as a video game ranking system that determines how enlightened you are. But unfortunately, you can't climb this ranked ladder by grinding out MMR over time. This game is pay to win, because the only way you're moving up the ladder is with money. And while OT3 may not seem very high, Mark estimates that by the time a Scientologist has reached OT level 3, they have spent upwards of $200,000 on Scientology.
What the fuck?
Now you may be starting to see why Scientology was pretty upset about this.
How do you go from 240 to 200,000?
The true beliefs of Scientology were shared with the entire world. Even Jenna Miscavige, the niece of David Miscavige, who's the dude who's been the leader of Scientology since the 80s, has talked about how she learned about the Xenu stuff from South Park.
But it did get out.
Wow.
I mean, it eventually...
It did. From South Park.
From South Park.
Yeah, that's where I learned about it.
Oh my god. That's unreal.
This story that was previously only accessible behind a $200,000 paywall was now completely free public information that everyone knew about. As you would imagine, this would essentially destroy Scientology's entire business model, since they profited off of people who were seeking the truth.
What's better than telling people a stupid story and having them believe you? Having them pay you for it, stupid!
Combine that with the fact that the story itself sounds like, well, a poorly written science fiction novel.
I wonder
you
why.
can pretty much guarantee that anyone that hears about this will never be joining your religion.
Yeah,
However, the
no.
release of the episode didn't immediately cripple Scientology. You see, they had their own unique form of contingency. According to Mark, in the church, Scientologists were taught that you could not hear anything about higher OT levels until you made it to those levels yourself. If you did happen to learn about levels that you haven't reached yet, you would get pneumonia and die. So, luckily for Scientology, if any of their members saw any of the stuff in this episode, if they didn't die of pneumonia the next day, then it couldn't be true. Because of this, a lot of the members at the time just thought that it wasn't what Scientologists actually believe. And because the vast majority of these people would never reach OT level 3,
So,
it
what
didn't
happened?
even matter, since they'd never really even know. So while in the short term, it wasn't a massive blow to Scientology,
But the long
real way
term.
that South Park took down Scientology was by opening the door for others. After South Park ruthlessly went after Scientology and came out completely unscathed, everyone else saw that and thought, huh, I guess Scientology isn't all that scary. There's nothing they can really do. And
Makes
from
sense.
that moment on, Scientology was the laughingstock of religions. No one is afraid to make fun of them anymore, now that they realize that the worst they can do is send some vaguely threatening letters and dig through your trash. Now everyone knows about Scientology's weird beliefs, about Lord Xenu and his army of alien ghosts, and we can all point and laugh at them because of how stupid that is.
How ridiculous
Most
it is.
importantly, no one who knows anything about them will join their scam ever again. They have to rely solely on people who live under a rock, because the vast majority of the public knows what Scientology is really
At this point,
and
yeah.
despite the church's claims of continued growth, some estimates place the total number of Scientologists at less than 10,000 in 2023.
That's
a
still
far
really
cry from
big.
their numbers long ago. And all of this is the case because South Park wasn't afraid to go after the boogeyman nearly 20 years ago. Even their biggest
boogeyman.
spokesperson, our boy Tom Cruise, seems to be moving away from the church as rumors
Really?
spread about him distancing himself. You know, speaking of Tom Cruise, did he ever make it out of that closet? I totally forgot to check up on him.
Go away!
No, it doesn't seem like he came out of the closet yet, but
No.
it does seem like he threatened to sue South Park. Reports say that
Ah,
Tom wasn't
right.
too happy about his portrayal in this episode, with Matt and Trey wanting to joke about the rumors that Tom Cruise might be secretly gay. When they discussed this idea with their lawyers, they
Right, that's
pointed out
right.
that Cruise has a history of suing people who had spoken about his sexuality. So, because this is South Park, their loophole was to place Mr. Cruise in an actual closet. Sources close to Tom Cruise claim that he was not happy about this, which is
Yeah, but it's
completely
funny.
shocking because he seemed so convincing when he said this.
I have never worried, Matt, about what other people think and what other people say.
There were rumors that Cruise
yeah.
still threatened to sue South Park, but these were never confirmed. However, it seemed like Tom might be the one to get the last laugh, because only a few months later came the legendary Closet Gate. You see, they had planned to
Closet Gate?
rebroadcast the episode on Comedy Central in March, but suddenly, and without any explanation, the episode was canceled and replaced with another. Immediately, speculation about Tom Cruise's involvement in the pulling of the episode was seen all over, with anonymous sources claiming that Tom himself had the episode pulled. The narrative was that during his Mission Impossible 3 publicity tour, Cruise had caught wind of the rebroadcast, and he told Paramount, the studio behind Mission Impossible, that he would boycott his own publicity tour if the episode was aired on Comedy Central. Comedy Central was also owned by Paramount, so it made sense that Cruise could do something like this. 2 days later,
got
Matt
it.
and Trey would release their own official statements on the matter, which went exactly as you would expect it to.
So, Scientology, you may have won this battle, but the million-year war for Earth has just begun. You have obstructed us for now, but your feeble bid to save humanity will fail.
Fans of the show were not very happy about the situation, as they rushed to spread pirated copies of the episode online to ensure that it
Yep.
wasn't censored. The full episode was even uploaded on YouTube, where it would amass over 700,000 views. When asked
Wow.
about this, Comedy Central even
amazing.
said that they didn't even ask to have it removed, pretty much confirming that they didn't seem to mind this kind of piracy. A couple months later, Matt and Trey
Fair.
even hosted a public screening of the episode in a London theater, handing out free copies of the episode to attendees.
Oh my god, that's
afterwards.
amazing.
They wanted as many people as possible to see this episode, and more importantly, they didn't want to be defeated by Tom Cruise.
Yeah, hell
It would
no.
be months before the episode would be rebroadcasted, but eventually in June of 2006, it was broadcasted for the first time since the initial airing. Now, during all of this, Tom Cruise remained adamant that he had absolutely nothing to do with the pulling of the episode. He would discuss it in an interview on ABC. And even though I couldn't find
he
the
didn't, then
video
who
of it,
did?
I'm gonna read the quote here, and you can tell me whether you believe it or not. First of all, could you ever imagine sitting down with anyone? I would never sit down with someone and question them on their beliefs. Here's the thing. I'm really not even going to dignify this. I honestly didn't even really know about it. I'm working, making my movie. I've got my family. I'm busy. I don't spend my days going, what are people saying about me? Yeah, whatever you say, Tom.
It
But that
sounds a
pretty
little
much rounds out
defensive.
the Tom Cruise era of South Park controversy, leaving us with only one more thing to talk about. Following the airing of this episode, Isaac Hayes, the voice actor for Chef, would quit from the show. Hayes was a Scientologist,
Rip
and
Chef.
shortly after, he published a statement berating the show for being intolerant and bigoted towards religious beliefs. Matt Stone would release his own statement, clapping back at Hayes, calling out the hypocrisy in profiting off of making fun of every other religion, but not being able to take it when it's his turn. The very first episode of the following season saw a plot in which Chef would be brainwashed by a cult, leaving all of his friends in South Park behind. Despite their best attempts, the boys
I
are
remember
unable
that.
to rescue him from the cult, where he suffers an absolutely horrific death. This would be the last of Chef that we would see in South Park. Then, 2 years after his departure
Yep.
from the show, Hayes would pass away from a stroke at the age of 65.
Yeah, and unfortunately, there was a lot of speculation going around too regarding Isaac Hayes and his comments about South Park, disparaging it and disavowing it for its attacks on religious beliefs. A lot of people speculated that it was very uncharacteristic of Isaac Hayes, that somebody else wrote it for him. Speculated to be another Scientologist of some kind. And Stone and Parker were right in clapping back and calling out Hayes for I'm gonna say, for again taking issue with the fact that Hayes never once said anything about disparaging against other religions until it was his turn. Here's the thing. I can confirm that that's bullshit. Because I am an atheist. Atheism has been targeted by South Park. And when it was targeted, specifically, I thought it was fucking hilarious. I thought it was amazing. It was clever. I, as an atheist, thought that was very clever. Even against some of the stuff that have been going against the LGBTQ community, which technically Arroways people have not been targeted, but close enough. I wasn't offended. I wasn't even offended for the people who are close to me, who are other members of the LGBTQ. You know, the bisexuals, the gays, the lesbians, trans people especially. I know surprisingly a lot of trans or intend to be trans people. As my favorite comedian Steve Hofstetter once said, you can't cherry pick this shit. You can't just accept every other form of comedic value, but the moment it attacks something that applies to you, you have a problem with it. That is not how comedy works. And I do firmly believe that Isaac Hayes did not initially write that comment to Stone and Parker about, disparaging religions and whatnot. Religions and cults. I don't think Hayes did that because he loved the character of Chef. He loved the show and he loved Stone and Parker very much. And I do believe that he may kind of been forced out of the South Park team against his will. Or maybe kind of in his will, but not entirely, Now, there is speculation that Scientology may have had something to do with his death a few years after he left the show. I don't know. I don't know how accurate that speculation is. Is it a possibility? Yes. Do I think it's likely? Personally, not so much. It is possible, but not very likely.
Then, 2 years after his departure from the show, Hayes would pass away from a stroke at the age of 65.
Poor
The circumstances surrounding his death were rather odd, but we'll come back to that in a second. Years later, Isaac Hayes' son would come out and state that his father had suffered from a stroke in January of 2006, which left him unable to speak or comprehend much of anything. During this time, everyone around him was involved in Scientology, so while suffering from obvious brain damage, Scientology quit on his behalf.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, Hayes' son wasn't the first to make this accusation, as journalist Roger Friedman, who was a close friend of Hayes, wrote an article the day after Hayes' death that essentially makes the same claims, as well as some shocking ones that I had somehow never heard of until I started researching for this video.
Ooh,
He
do
describes
tell.
an interaction with Matt Stone shortly after the release of the episode, in which he details Hayes coming to him in tears, stating that he was under pressure from Scientology and that he would be forced to quit if they didn't stop making fun of it. A week later, he was performing chef songs at a ball, indicating that his relationship with South Park was as strong as ever. But after
Again,
his
he
stroke,
loves South
he had
Park.
been severely mentally and physically impaired, barely recognizing Roger at one of his disastrous shows. And then,
Jeez.
just a couple years later, came his untimely death.
Yep.
On August 10th, 2008, Isaac Hayes was found unresponsive in his home on the ground next to a running treadmill. The cause of death for Hayes was determined to be another stroke, however, an autopsy was never done. This left a lot more questions than answers.
I wonder
Why
why.
would someone who's recovering from a stroke be on a treadmill alone in their house?
That too.
Why didn't they do an
That's
autopsy?
definitely
The
odd.
potential answers all seem to point exactly where we expect them to. As Roger
Scientology
Friedman
blocked some
mentions in his
information
article, and as we talked
and
about
procedures.
earlier, Scientology is very much against any kind of psychiatric care or psychotropic drugs, which just so happen to be precisely the kind of drugs that would be routine in helping someone recover from a stroke.
That's true as
Scientologists
well.
also believe in a very specific detox treatment that is used to clear any of these potentially dangerous drugs out of your system. This treatment is known as purification rundown, and it consists of spending hours a day in a sauna alongside consistent exercise and a diet that consists of a bunch of different vitamins, including over 300 times the recommended dose of niacin. So,
Oh
running
my
back through
God.
all this information, we know that Isaac Hayes was recovering from a stroke, likely taking some form of psychotropic meds as part of his treatment. We know that everyone that was consistently present in his life at this time was a Scientologist. We know that Scientology hates psychotropic medication and avoids them at all costs. We know their treatment to flush these terrible drugs out of your system involves lots of time spent in a sauna and exercise. And we know that Isaac Hayes was found dead next to a running treadmill. Now, some may look at this information and put pieces of this puzzle together and say things like, Scientology killed Isaac Hayes, or they're monsters who
Maybe not
tarnished his
intentionally.
legacy and took advantage of him at his lowest moment because they couldn't stand the fact
That
that he
is
was friends
possible.
with the people who had criticized them.
That is
or
possible.
even, they did all of this while actively forcing him to take part in a dangerous pseudoscience treatment that would eventually be the cause of his untimely death.
That might be possible.
You know, I personally wouldn't make any accusations like that, but some might.
Oh. The end.
You know, despite all the darkness we've talked about today, I think we can all rest assured that the only trajectory for Scientology from here is down.
Yeah, please.
And if it weren't for South Park back in 2005, that might not be the case.
Fair.
So now, hopefully you all have a better understanding of that time that South Park took down an entire religion. Oh yeah, and don't forget to check out our wonderful sponsor,
I will not be
War Thunder.
checking
You
out
can
War
check them out
Thunder.
on PC, PlayStation, or Xbox. Use my
No,
link in
thank
the pinned
you.
comment
I'm
or the
good. I
video
don't need those
description
types
to
of
register.
games.
Remember, if you're new or you haven't
I
played
know
in
that
6
there's some
months, you'll
people
get
who
that
would like these
massive
kinds of
bonus pack
games.
that
I
includes
personally
premium
would
vehicles and a
not.
bunch of other cool stuff.
Not
so
my
go
shtick.
click my link in the description and get started
I don't
now.
like PvPs for one thing. Pip haters? Oh my god. Why do people hate on Pip so much? This was a great video. This was a very good and informative video, and it truly makes me understand how insane Scientology people and that cult in general are. And yes, I'm going to refer to them as a cult because typically religions are very open about their beliefs and their history and whatnot. And Scientology is most definitely not. And it was very cool being able to see a little bit of information on the podcasts, as well as the various articles that did talk a little bit more about Scientology, particularly on the insider information on Scientology. It's really fascinating when we have either like experts or ex-members of organizations come forth with information about said religion, organization, with knowledge on their expertise of history or machines or science of some aspect. I absolutely love that kind of content. It's fantastic. And especially when you get ex-members from organizations, they can reveal so much information that you never imagined possible. This was a wonderful video by Blooms. I can understand why it has so many views, especially in such a short period of time. The other videos he was talking about maybe had like 500k to 2.1 million views. This one has 4.7 in less than 7 months. That's crazy. Again, it just goes to show how much research that he did, the research that Stone and Parker went through to even create this episode, Trapped in the Closet, in the first place. Absolutely unreal. I respect them so much more for that, and I would not be surprised if, secretly or maybe publicly known, Trapped in the Closet was meant to be an expose on Scientology. Because, like Blooms had said, some people knew about Scientology. They knew about it at best, but it wasn't really widely known to the public yet. And everybody's talking about, I learned more about Scientology from the South Park episode. Even Scientologists learned more about their own religion from a parody comedy episode about them than they did their own organization, even after 15 plus years being a part of said organization. And if it really is just a big scam, wow, they really got away with it for a very long time. By the way, if you're gonna be like a tier 3 and that's one of the lowest, at least that's what it looked like. No, maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe tier 3 was one of the highest or something like that. I don't remember for sure, but if you're gonna go through all those levels and it having ended up donate $200,000 to this organization that is basically a pay-to-win scandal, in order to learn more about the organization, yeah, it's behind a paywall. Really? This is supposed to be a religious organization. Why are you doing that? Donation is one thing, but required payments to advance and level? What? What freaking religion has a leveling system that's a pay to win, essentially? What? In any case, this was a fantastic video. I learned a lot more about Scientology. I learned a lot more about the in-depth analysis of Trapped in the Closet to begin with, because again, this was back in season 9, so I think I may have done my own digging and research, but not anything this extensive. And of course, I learned a little bit more about the effects that South Park had on Scientology. Because again, a lot of people mention that South Park was their introduction to Scientology, or was the clarification for Scientology if they were already a part of the organization to begin with. So it only makes sense that South Park's expose on them is what started to result in Scientology's downfall. But man, I really hope they just go extinct and just vanish. I'm not saying the people should, I'm saying the organization and the belief system should. Because it is absolutely immoral. The existence of this very organization and religion is very immoral. It comes off as very corrupt. And it's absolutely nonsensical. It's ridiculous. But that is all that I have time for today, because turns out I might be having to make dinner tonight. I wasn't planning to, but I'll already have instructions. It'll be fine. So thank you all for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this commentary and analysis. And again, if I paused a lot, go find a reactor. Okay, I'm a commentator and analyzer. I almost said analyzer. Okay, maybe not that exactly, but no, I'm more than just a reactor. I don't just let it play as is. I'm gonna pause a lot. And if you have a problem with that, just go find somebody else's channel. Clearly my channel is not for you because I'm a pauser, okay? That is what commentary and analysis is. You gotta get your thoughts out. And me and my ADHD brain, I don't actually have ADHD, but I definitely act like it sometimes. But me and my ADHD-esque brain, I will quickly forget things. So I have to pause as soon as I can. And I have to get my thoughts and ideas out, because otherwise I'm gonna forget them. So that's why I pause a lot. This is just how I am. Deal with it. Anyways, I'm done. So thank you all for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this. And as usual, until the next video, guys, check you laters. And before I end it off, just want to give a quick thank you to all my patrons who get early access to all my videos, early access to all my new comic pages, a lot of in-depth commentary and analysis, high-quality videos and other content, all that good stuff. So thank you guys so much. Peace.